Okay, well, I am back. Thanks for joining me. This time we're going to talk about Manifest Needs by David McClellan. Your book talks about it kind of briefly. David McClellan was a really great social psychologist, and he's most known, I think, for popularizing and actually developing a measure for need for achievement. He was associated with, I think he was one of the founders of a company called Hay Group that's known for doing compensation work. In other words, their jobs as consultants, they would come in and analyze the compensation levels of an organization according to the market and help companies figure out what salaries they should have for what positions. But they also were had a very deep behavioral background because of David, and they developed a measure. It was a TAT measure that stands for Thematic Apprehension Test, TAT. Yeah. And the way those tests work is kind of unique. Instead of a paper pencil, answer this question, they interview you. I actually went to Hay Group in Boston, interviewed with them, and they gave me this test. It's quite interesting. And so they asked me, describe a time where you succeeded in spite of adversity. That's it. And I would just begin to talk. I'd think of something and describe it to them. And they would just continue, the interviewer would just continue to follow up. And they had the interviewer taking notes on how I responded, and then another rater. So they had inter-rater reliability. They would compare notes. And what they were looking for in that case was how I described. I got to choose a scenario. They didn't lead me down any path whatsoever. And they were looking at, did I describe a scenario where I had an opportunity to overcome something and I did it with people, where I succeeded through the cooperation with other people, or did I do it and view it as something I had to accomplish in spite of people? Someone who has a high need for achievement is characterized by their desire to take on tasks like that wholeheartedly. They take on challenges. They like achievement circumstances. An example I give of someone, a scenario where someone would have a high need for achievement is as follows. You're sitting on the subway. You live outside of New York City, but you work in New York, so your commute in is a 45-minute train ride. And you're one of these nerdy people who does the New York Times crossword puzzle. And you're sitting down, and the train is pretty full, as usual. And you've managed to get all of them, you're certain, except one answer. And it is the phrase that you have to, the word you're looking for is the name of a camel with two humps, and you don't know it, and you're sitting there and you just have one left, and the person who's sitting there who has a high need for achievement wants to complete the crossword puzzle, of course, because that's the goal of doing it, and you're so close. The man who's standing to your left just happens to be glancing down, and he sees that you're working on it and you've almost got it in a almost a joyous voice, because he wants to be helpful. He says, Deuteron. That's the name for a double hump camel. And you look at your spaces and you're like, D, and it fits. And you're so upset. So the person who's low in need for achievement would say, hey, thank you, awesome. I got all 39 words, and you helped me with just one word. I got 39 out of 40, and then I was lucky enough to stand next to you. We accomplished that together. The person who's high in need for achievement is really upset because they get satisfaction from completing work on their own, autonomously from other people. So that gives you a little bit of feel for what that dimension is, that need for achievement. There's a lot of theory on it and a lot of papers written on it. We like people in our organizations who have a high need for achievement because they go look for opportunities to do great things and work really hard to accomplish them, because they get the satisfaction of knowing they achieved something that was hard. Typically, it's kind of a generalization. The task that someone high in need for achievement wants to take on, they would perceive that about 50% of the people who are like them, So if it's me, 50% of the people who are college professors in business or something, if it's a business related, type of task, I'd say, well, what about my colleagues? 50% of my colleagues wouldn't be able to get that answer right or wouldn't be able to accomplish this task, but I did. So that stands for something. After all, if I'm trying to accomplish a task that I feel like everyone in my situation could and should be able to accomplish, then what kind of satisfaction can I derive from that? I would expect that any college professor in business would know what MBO is, Management by Objectives. How is that making me feel good? So I want to pursue those types of things that I feel like about half the people who are similar to me might have a difficult time or not be able to accomplish. So I've studied this a little bit and used need for achievement in my dissertation research, and in doing that I stumbled upon this. There's two concepts that are related, but one builds on the other. There's need for achievement, which is what I just described, and then there's achievement motivation. And achievement motivation is need for achievement minus the effects of fear, and specifically minus the effects of fear that we have of failing when we try to accomplish that task. So someone can have a high need for achievement, but it doesn't look like it. They look like a stifled, frustrated person. So if we understand need for achievement and then we go around saying you're high in need for achievement, you're low in need for achievement based on what they are striving to accomplish, we might not be accurate. Someone might have a high need for achievement, but they also have within them a lot of fear of failing. I know the example that I was telling you about in my childhood where I was led to believe and felt that I was not intelligent. And then I ended up in learning disability lab with Miss Austin, which was adding insult to injury in some ways, because back then it would be announced that all the LD students should stand and we would walk out together. So that was wonderful. My fear of failing was high. So the consequence of that was I wanted to learn to spell and to do math and basic things we were doing in school. I wanted to raise my hand so that I could understand it because I didn't understand it, but my hand didn't go up in the air. I didn't try. And the reason is I was scared that I would hear the same message I had heard before that hurt me, which is, oh yes, stupid boy over there who has his hand up, who doesn't understand this math problem or whatever we're covering. It can be debilitating. When someone has a fear of failure, it's our job as managers to address that, to see the fear in them and to gently address it and to encourage them. We need to give them the tools and the comforts and encouragement and support structure to walk through that. Usually, when we have a fear of something, once we experience it, the fear diminishes. This year was the year that I learned how to fly paramotor. And the thing about paramotoring is your first flight is a solo. And so mine was done at Dunn Airport there in Titusville by myself, no one else out there. And I remember taxiing down the runway. I had my wing above me flying nicely, and I took off, and all I could think from that second until it was over was, I have to land. And I flew up to 2,000 feet, and I stayed up there about 45 minutes just because I was enjoying it, but I was pretty frightened of the landing. But once I landed, it wasn't a beautiful landing, but once I landed, the second flight was a little less scary. Not that much, but a little bit. Now I've done days of just touch and goes, and my confidence is just really soaring. Excuse the metaphor. So we like manifest needs, McClellan, in business. I think it's generally accepted that people who are leaders in organizations tend to have a high need for power because their need for power needs to be great enough that they can stand being unpopular when they make decisions that don't make everyone happy. That's always a downside to being in a leader position, is that you've got to choose X or Y there are almost always people on one side of the equation who are going to be unhappy. So there has to be an innate satisfaction that you derive from being the leader of those things that'll kind of counterbalance the negative effects of having to be not so popular or people not being happy with us. High need for power, high need for achievement, leaders that is, and low need for affiliation because, like I just pointed out, social relationships are based on approval. We tend to like those people that we approve of their decisions, and the leader's in a position to kind of piss people off as a part of their job. Unfortunately, you can't make everyone happy all the time, and so having a lower need for affiliation. Think about those three things as well, those dimensions of those manifest needs, as you pick a career, if you haven't decided yet. If you're high in need for affiliation, it means that you like talking with people and working with people, then you should really think about a career where you're going to have the opportunity to do that versus being in a cubicle working on a spreadsheet all day by yourself. I've had experiences doing that in my life, and I'm fine working on spreadsheets and stuff, but not all day, every day. But I've seen people who have a lower need for affiliation who do very well in those jobs. It's just a personality kind of fit thing. So hopefully that's helpful. It's already 11 minutes, so let me let you go. Get on to the next one. See ya.